I know I only made this video about finale of the Deep Galleries like about a week ago, but to me, it felt like a very long time because I took a few days of break for myself, and let me tell you guys, going out to touch some grass was the best feeling ever. I get to drive and see the city, draw for myself, get to play Stardew Valley while stressing out on HSR's stupid park grip, and watch Sekai no Doa to realize this guy is hot. It was amazing. But of course, it's time to get back to work and talk about the second part of Genshin's new artifact lore, and this time, let's talk about Long Night's Oath. After the previous video, I can understand if most of you find the finale of the Deep Galleries to be the superior lore bomb as of date. And honestly, I can understand that because the artifact mentioned and answers the biggest mysteries in this game, that is about the Three Moon Sisters, the First Angel, and the distant traveler that being mentioned during the very first day of this game's update in records of Jueyun. However, the other set, Long Night's Oath, should not be underestimated because the lore mentioned in that set is also just as big. Maybe not as big as finale of the Deep Galleries, but I can say it's pretty up there. We are more than halfway through Genshin's storyline after all, so it'll be unavoidable if lore from books, artifacts, and even world quests will be relevant. Skirk will be coming in the next few patches, and I just know that she will play a huge role in NOD-KRAI ARCHON questline. That said, sit back and get comfy as I tell you the lore behind this artifact set. That said, don't forget to give this video a like and comment so the channel can be noticed by the algorithm. My name is NOD-KRAI'S and I make lore and commentary videos on this channel to keep you company. Alright, so the lore behind this artifact set involves few factions mentioned in the web event. These factions are the Fatuis, the Lightkeepers, the Frostmoon Scions, the Snowland Fae, the Treasure Hoarders, and the Wild Hunt. Yes, I'm not kidding when I say these clowns are relevant in an artifact set. The TLDR of this artifact set is the gruesome battle between the Lightkeepers and the Abyss and how the Fatuis was involved in this. The first cry Archon, Belitzar, is indirectly mentioned while the Torre is directly mentioned in the artifact's lore. Like every artifact lore, the word choices in this artifact set is very convoluted, so I'll be recapping you the lore first, then we can start the theory crafting from there. Also, researching and interpreting the story behind this artifact lore is very difficult, so pardon me if I make some mistakes. Once, the land was leveled flat by the Wild Hunt at the behest of despotic Naias. Back then, there was an evil monk who spoke in strange language, had treacherous plots trying to steal the Heavenly Moon's power, and wanting to see what's beyond the firmament. The monk eventually told the first Choir Archon, Belitzar, about his plan, causing the Moon Children, or people of the Frostmoon Scions, to scatter all over the land. The mad monk, who eventually ascends to the sky, unable to flee from the swallowing firmament and meet his demise. All this was a tale before this land became a paradise, and it was a dream of both young boy under the moonlight shared at that time. One of them dreamt of the land to be a paradise, while the other listened to his wishes. Years passed, one of them was executed for being a notorious and infamous bandit known throughout the nation, while the other somehow understood the final words that were accidentally left to him by his dead friend. What comes next? The long night fell into the land, and the royal court from the north no longer minded the far borderlands from the snowy plains. The boy eventually became the first Torchforger, borrowing the power from the priestess of the Moon Children to combat the abyss that invaded the land. With the borrowed power, the Torchforger shone a light beam in the name of the moon, banishing the abyssal creatures that invaded. Since then, the survivors of the land built a lighthouse to gaze upon the new ruler of Snezhnaya, the Tsaritsa. The Torchforger made his way to the Cry Archon's palace and defended the childhood dreams of his dead friend, granting him the royal edict and oath that he sought. The land is now a paradise, or we now know them as NOD-KRAI. Hundreds of years have passed since the people of NOD-KRAI swore oath to the Tsaritsa for eternal fidelity. The lighthouse stayed lit and created an organization called the Lightkeepers to watch over the lighthouse and combat the abyss. To the current people of NOD-KRAI, as long as the high tower stays lit, they will live happily ever after. there won't be any fear towards monsters, nor they need protection from the Snezhnaya military. However, that changed when the leader of the Wild Hunt approached and galloped across the night sky, creating a chilling sound across the firmament. As the warriors of the Lightkeepers await the order from the current torchbearer, or what the people of that time called the Star Shina, he stood in silence as the warriors from the north, the Fatuis, had arrived as backup to aid them in the battle. Yet despite their claims, the Star Shina knew that there's ulterior motive behind the Northland warriors' words. From the lead Fatui officer's mask came a voice, low and cold, yet there's a hint of mocking love from parts unknown. The man with the mocking mask then said, "That is where the dark calamity began. Remember, Snezhnaya cannot bear the weight of your defeat. Warriors of the Nightingale, fight with all your might. Yet should none of you return, then we will take care of the aftermath." The Abyss, or known as the Wild Hunt, invaded the land once again. People of NOD-KRAI only knew the tales of the Wild Hunt as a legend, but never to their horror they knew the legend they always hear from childhood and passed down from their ancestors has become a reality. However, there will always be those who face their fears to protect others. There will be those who have to be the light in darkness. The Lightkeepers, standing brave and bold, stand as they look at the looming abyssal darkness in front of them. The leader raised his sword high as his face calm and bold, as the soldiers marched through the battlefield like flies attracted to fire, where no one were able to safely return. Only one remained, yet his body was torn asunder. Blood and flesh were all over the place, and his body became disfigured. He walked into the abyss to complete his unfulfilled oath. Some say, if you hear the sound of mournful bells, perhaps that's the warrior that's sworn to hunt the Wild Hunts. There's even one time a warrant officer from the Fatui wanted to enter the battlefield, but his request to strike was denied by his leader, who is a harbinger. Even so, he silently took action because to him, he wanted to save the people and couldn't stand looking at innocent people getting swallowed by the abyss. The warrant officer denied the orders of his superiors and entered the battlefield to save as many people as he could, deeming him as a criminal at the end. In his words, "If this is what those in power called order, then to hell with it." At last, after a long time of war, the foul miasma dissipated. The long night has finally ended, and the light of dawn shone once again on top of that muddy, skeleton-filled land. None of the Lightkeepers made it back to the tower, only the warrant officer, who is now a criminal along with the children he saved. Even though there's mishaps, the renegade doctor paid no heed as the plans of the Fatui were finally achieved. The officer's crimes, however, were absolved and swore a new oath to protect NOD-KRAI. Upon the land soaked in blood and skeletons, new warriors rise to stand until the end to fight against the abyss, the new age of Rodniki. After that new oath, the warriors of NOD-KRAI continued their war against the abyss to protect their land in a southern land called Lempo Island. Among them, joined a peculiar young warrior from the north who is also a direct descendant of the first generations of the Lightkeepers that fought with the first Torchforger. They marched to the battlefield believing that they are protected by the Lord of all Fae and Snezhnaya, only for them to fall with no one surviving except the young warrior. Soaked and covered in the sea of blood and corpses, the young warrior prayed to the deceased first crier Archon. A certain phantom notices this, perhaps out of boredom, as that ghostly blue wildfire starts to kindle again, setting a new battlefield as the fire burns brighter. Even though this time the artifact's lore is in order, the words are a lot more cryptic than last time. It took me a lot of brain juice to make the sense out of the artifact set, and this is the best outcome that I can go with. Honestly, I would appreciate it if they can make this artifacts lore with easier words to understand, but I suppose making them this cryptic is also a way to not directly tell the players about the game's actual plan for future content. Besides, they always hide the new upcoming content within books and artifacts anyway, so I suppose that makes sense. In any case, if you don't understand any of that, which I can't blame you for, the first Torchforger worked together with a priestess from the Frostmoon Scions to defeat the Wild Hunts. The first Choir Archon died during the first invasion of the Wild Hunt, and Snezhnayan government was not ruled by the Archon, but by royalties at the time, the Nias. It was after the invasion that the Tsaritsa took over, and people of NOD-KRAI established the lighthouse to gaze at the Tsaritsa and created the Lightkeepers. The second Wild Hunt invasion is where the Lightkeepers fought, but none of them safely returned. Even though the Fatuis were present, none of them helped the Lightkeepers and just watched from the sidelines, waiting for the Lightkeepers to succeed. Only a warrant officer from the Fatuis helped people of NOD-KRAI and saved those in need. The warrant officer became a criminal, but was soon quickly abolished as she swore a new oath to protect NOD-KRAI with new warriors. But soon, during the New Warriors expedition to Lempo Isle and fight against the Abyss, none of them made it back, and a new war is hinted to break very soon. That's basically the TLDR of it. It took me a lot of brain power to even go to this conclusion, so yeah. By the way, before we continue to the theory section, I want you guys to know that I made this video all by myself, and I also working on a project based on the previous video's result. If you guys remember, I said in my previous video that if that video reaches 200 likes, I will create an illustrated video of the finale of the Deep Galleries, because to me, that artifacts lore is pretty fascinating. I finally made some of the new updates for that, and you can see that in my Ko-fi and community post and also my Twitter. Don't worry, the Ko-fi is not paid, everything is free. But just in case you guys want to support me, it would be great if you guys can like this video and subscribe to the channel, because that lets this channel get pushed by the algorithm, and that lets me know that I'm doing a good job. With that said, let's start with the theory section. It's very unclear, but I can safely say that there's two Wild Hunt invasions. The first invasion is mentioned in the flower, while the second invasion is from the bloom to the circlet. This means that the first Wild Hunt invasion is the cataclysm that happened in NOD-KRAI, while the second invasion could likely have happened very recently. Now, why do I say that? The artifact set said the Tsaritsa became the ruler of Snezhnaya after the invasion ended, and the Fatui was established when the Tsaritsa rose to become the ruler. The current Archons except Zhongli and Fenty were not the original Archons at the time, so this likely means that the first Choir Archon died during the battle against Khaenri'ah, along with the other Archons who were present at the time. The Bloom mentioned the event happened hundreds of years after the first invasion, and also mentioned a mocking laugh from the lead officer's mask, likely referring to Piero, who is mentioned to have a mocking mask in the Baleflame artifact set. I wouldn't say the second invasion happened like a few years ago or so, but considering that at least Dottore and Piero were present at the time, at least this happened around 100 years ago. The artifacts lore also mentioned a bandit that was executed and became famous across the nation, which means this bandit is none other than Reed Miller, who is also the founder of the Treasure Hoarders. Reed Miller was accompanied by another boy who was soon revealed to be the first Torchforger, and the Torchforger respected Reed Miller's wish to make the place they lived in as paradise, hence why the events we see in the artifact set happened. In the event, we also learned that Reed Miller wished to create a world without boundaries and hid a great treasure in NOD-KRAI. If I were to guess, since the treasure hoarders are going to be relevant in the ARCHON quest, then this great treasure that Reed Miller hid is likely the something that the Wild Hunt is trying to find. Of course, I am positively believe that I'll be proven wrong very quickly, but if I were to hold this theory a little bit longer, then maybe what Reed Miller holds is something that is closely related to Hyperborea. In the artifact set, we learned that both Reed Miller and the Torchforger shared their wishes beneath the moon's glow. In the circlet, we also learned that the Torchforger hailed from the North Wintry City and originally worked as a spy under the first Choir Archon. Since the description of these words specifically mentioned North City and beneath moon's glow, Reed Miller could also be a descendant from the Hyperborea, and he hid a treasure from something related to the said place. Anything that is usually related to the Abyss, either they're just destructive in nature or rebel against the heavenly principles like the Abyss Order. Since the Wild Hunt has a sentient leader, which is something that is a bit surprising considering they're from the Abyss, then what they are searching could be something that is related to the heavenly principles. We learn in the finale of the Deep Galleries that the first angel and the Voyager rebelled against the heavenly principles, causing them to get punished after that. The Voyager shared the forbidden secrets of the heavenly principles to the angel, so there is likely something left by the two, and Reed Miller happens to have something that is left by them. Now, first of all, I am not insinuating that Reed Miller is the youth from finale of the Deep Galleries, because judging from the timeline, that's very unlikely. And I doubt the youth is still alive anyway, since the Voyager's consciousness is presumably still lingering in the Spiral Abyss. However, since Reed Miller is a bandit, and we know that the treasure hoarders usually go to ruins to find treasure, this could be something that Reed Miller found and hid in NOD-KRAI. My next theory is, what is the Fatuis doing in NOD-KRAI? In the artifact set, they pretty much just watch from the sidelines while the Lightkeepers get destroyed by the Wild Hunt. Since the Torchforger, or the Star Shina at the time, knew the Fatuis had ulterior motives, and the way the Fatuis did not help the Lightkeepers at all, this means the Fatuis were waiting for the Lightkeepers' defeat and taking control of NOD-KRAI for themselves. We are hinted by Mavuika that it will be unavoidable for the Traveler and Paimon to have direct confrontation with the Fatuis, especially that NOD-KRAI is going to be a place where all the Harbingers are stationed under the Tsaritsa's command. As for who they're stationed for, it's likely it has something to do with the moon or related to the Voyager. Now that I think about it, while I was reading the script, somehow something clicked on me. The first Cryo Archon is described as the Tsar of all Fae, and since the current Tsaritsa rise to Archonhood after the first Cryo Archon's death, it's likely that either the Tsaritsa is also a Fae or an angel. I speculate to be either of the two because the angels are cursed by the heavenly principles if they love at only one person, otherwise they'll turn into a silly. Let's dissect them one by one, shall we? We are going to put everything we learned from finale of the Deep Galleries, this artifact set, and everything else from past lore, so strapped in. If she is a Fae, then it's possible that she is a descendant from the surviving Faes from Hyperborea and a follower from the first Cryo Archon, Tsar. We learn in the finale of the Deep Galleries that the Faes are created by the artisans of the Golden City of Hyperborea using the forbidden methods of the first angel. We also learn that these Faes still influence Neshnaya in their own ways, and since they follow the first Cryo Archon, then likely they have connection with the Tsaritsa as well. These Faes are created to create a perfect being that could merge with the world, and considering the Tsaritsa wants the Gnosis to presumably revive something, then she could be the surviving Fae that wants to fulfill this wish of the angel. It's similar to the Egeria and Focalor situation, where Focalor was appointed as Egeria's successor, and Focalor was also a creation of Egeria, that being an Oceanid. If that's the case, then Tsar probably appointed the Tsaritsa as the next Archon before he went to Khaenri'ah for the Cataclysm. But something in me feels like that's sort of unlikely, so let's move on to the next possibility, and that is being an angel. If you guys remember from Yohwal the Juhtin and finale of the Deep Galleries, she said that angels are divine envoys sent by heavenly principles to guide humanity. However, after being cursed by the heavenly principles, the angels are cursed to become sillies if they ever love someone and not share the love that was meant for all. This happened with the first angel, and the other sillies we see during our travels are those who are unable to retain their form. Yohwal Tejuhtin and Nabu Malikatsa are the angels that were able to retain their original form, with Yohwal Tejuhtin still alive until this day to serve humanity in Atlan, while Nabu Malikatsa was deceased due to aiding King Deshret for rebelling against the heavenly principles. You might notice something, but all of them have similar patterns. Both Yohualtechuhtin and Nabu Malikata serve humanity in their own way, and they show their dislike towards the heavenly principles. So what if the Tsaritsa is also an angel? Unlike other nations where we have a lot of crumbs prior to their updates, except Natlan of course, it's difficult to say what NOD-KRAI actually is, but we could determine something based on what we know. You see, people from Frostmoon Sios are essentially people from Hyperborea that still praised the moon and fled to NOD-KRAI, since Long Night Zoth hinted at them being able to wield strange power that predates the 7 elements that Mavuika mentioned. This means that whatever the Fatuis is doing has something to do with the said power, and the Tsaritsa need these people for such. I mean, that should be obvious already, but what does this have to do with the Tsaritsa being an angel? You guys do remember the tale of the first angel, right? She rebelled against the heavenly principles to create the face for the face to create the perfect being that can merge with the world.
She is a god with no love left for her people, nor do they have any left for her. Her followers hope only to be on her side when the day of her rebellion against the divine comes at last.
Now I want you to sink in at that words for a second. That is something that the first angel would do, no? Now look, I am not insinuating that the Tsaritsa is the first angel. At this point, when it comes to the current timeline, that is impossible. But we can say that she is at least an angel. It is heavily implied by Piero that the Tsaritsa still loves her people in her own way. And we see this many times with Capitano saying that the Tsaritsa allow the Harbingers to pursue their own freedom, and this freedom can take precedence over her orders. She allows Arlecchino and Capitano to use the Gnosis before taking it back to her. I can see some of you say it's impossible for the Tsaritsa to be an angel, but I want you guys to remember that the new Archons are just appointed, or it's obvious that they're the predecessors, like A with Makoto, Nahida with Ruka Defata, Fossilor appointed by Ojiria for cleaning her dirty laundry, and Mavuika by proving herself in the pilgrimage. The heavenly principles were absent after the cataclysm, and we learn that they are currently sleeping according to our sibling. It's important to note that the Tsaritsa before she became an Archon did exist prior to her ascension. At some point during the cataclysm, something deeply changed her, which could mean she finally understood what the heavenly principles are. Having the first Choir Archon died during the cataclysm, I could say there's two possibilities. Either the Choir Archon appointed the Tsaritsa before he go to Kaenria, or this is a golden chance for her to become the Archon and finally burn the old world to create the new one for humanity to live in. The Shiva the Gemstone also said, "Sorry to also have you shoulder the grievances of the world. Since you could endure my bitter cold, you must have desire to burn. Then burn away the old world for me." The Tsaritsa, according to Tartaglia, is a gentle soul. Too gentle, in fact. Arlecchino also said that she felt the true sincerity and compassion in the Tsaritsa. Even Wanderer also said everyone praises her for her kindness and benevolence. If this is not the most angel thing based on this game's description, then seriously, I don't know what is. But you know what's interesting? This is a nail in the coffin, but Wanderer said,
"Everyone praises her for her kindness and benevolence, but they forget that love is also a form of sin. What if she's just trying to compensate for something?"
I don't really want to theorize too much, but gathering the Gnosis really makes me think that the Tsaritsa is trying to revive the third descender, or at least try to use the power from the third descender to burn the old world. This is something that can be said similar to what Kukulkan is trying to do. Destroy the world to create a new civilization, and for the Tsaritsa, burn the old world only to find true and absolute peace for the new world. Going to NOD-KRAI likely means to use the Gnosis and gain the power that is left, and that is power from the moon. Not being involved with the Lightkeepers in their war against the Abyss likely means they want to take control of NOD-KRAI and use the people from the Frost Moon Science to do such a thing. Remember, in the web event, the Fatuis, the Frost Moon Science, and the Lightkeepers are in the center, likely meaning they're going to be the main factions that are going to be involved the most in NOD-KRAI questline. That being said, the Snowland Fae are likely going to have huge influence since they're the followers of the first Cryo Archon. This leaves me to the final theory. You see, at the end of this artifact set, it's mentioned that a new war will soon emerge. Considering the timeline in this artifact set is likely a bit more recent, then this war likely has something related with the Tsaritsa, burning the old world, and relating to other Archons as well. At the end of the Iridescent Arataki tour, Yaimiko NA mentioned a war that is about to emerge. The 3.5 Hexen Circle cutscene also mentioned this war as well, reminding them to not let prophecies or war ruin their bonds of friendship. This means that everyone all across Teyvat will be involved in Snezhnaya patch. I won't necessarily say in NOD-KRAI only, but since the Gnosis are taken and the Archons are necessarily against getting their Gnosis taken, it'll be inevitable that the Archons will be involved at some point. Renova already showed her gaze to the players. The effects of the paradox had already taken all over Teyvat, and A hinted at war that would soon break out. Hard to say what this war will be about because it could be anything, but likely their war against the heavenly principles themselves. Whatever this theorized angel wants to achieve, we will learn more as the update goes. That said, what are your thoughts on this artifact's lore? Let me know in the comments. Jana!